Hey, self storage. Tommy here at Storage Pug. Welcome to the 48th episode of Gabfocus. Melissa, I know we've done 48 of these. Well, this will be the 48th, but how in the world are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. But now, we're going to have to do something really cool for number 50.
Just be thinking about it. But y'all, you're in for a treat. This is our first ever tech summit. We feel like we're, middle 2023. So much cool stuff is happening. So when Melissa and I and Tyler, we were looking at who should speak at the tech summit, and really there were a handful of names. We came down with two, and I'm so glad both of them accepted my invite. We didn't have to pull in our alternates. So we have number one and number two right here in front of us. So I do want to quickly introduce our speakers. But before I do that, welcome to Gabfocus, everyone. If this is your first time to Gabfocus, you're in for a real treat. I'm so glad that you're here. And it's our monthly Q&A. We get to ask the questions, Melissa and I, and we bring on experts to share the hot topics of what's going on. So all that to say, welcome two of the top tech people in the storage space. First, I've got Chuck Gordon. Chuck is the CEO of Storable. Started his career in self-storage with Sparefoot, who we all know and love from 2008. Is that right, Chuck?
That's right.
Then 2018, created the company Storable, who now owns more companies than we can list. But Chuck, welcome to the Gabfocus stage, man. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you guys for having me. Excited to be here today.
I'm glad that you're here. And I know we've got a ton to get into, and excited to kind of hear your perspective and your journey into self-storage. Did you ever think, though, that you were going to run the largest tech company in the storage space when you were in college?
It wasn't exactly on my list of career expectations until we started doing it. And then, of course, we dreamed, of making it happen one day. But yeah, it's been amazing. I love the storage industry, learning more all the time. And it's just a true pleasure to work with such a great group of people. And I'm sure that that's something that is shared by everyone in this room.
No doubt. That's a big piece of it. And honestly, that's what keeps me around. It's like, man, the people, I keep meeting cool people, and the operators we get to work with, they're fun bunch, including a fun bunch. In that group is Raheem. Raheem's the president of Mini Mall Storage. He and I, we go way back. We've gotten to know each other over the last handful of years. And Raheem, you cut your teeth at Extra Space, so you got to see how the big guys do it. Moved your talents to Devon Self Storage for a number of years, and now running the show and basically doing everything at Mini Mall Storage. But how in the world are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Well, we're glad to have you here. I figure, we always love to have a practitioner like Storable, right? And we also love to have a vendor, but we also love to have a practitioner, someone who's actually using this technology. So I'm excited to hear how you guys have grown from a handful of facilities in Canada to 181 all across the US and Canada.
With plans to own them all.
With plans to own them all. So
we already discussed that. So yeah.
So yeah, this is going to be crazy. But so guys, we're glad to have both of you guys on. Gabfocus is brought to you by our teams here in Knoxville at Storage Pug and Chattanooga with Lighthouse Storage Solutions. Super stoked to be bringing you another episode. Like I said, if this is your first time ever, welcome. You chose a really good one to attend for the first time. And I already saw a gazillion familiar names. But this is how the sessions are set up. 60 minutes, live Q&A. You can submit your own questions, but we have a handful that were pre-submitted. And of course, Melissa and I will take turns going back and forth. And here's today's agenda. We're going to get to as many of these as we can, but we're going to start very soft by the state of technology and self-storage. We're going to break it down by automation and communication, which we feel like pretty big and hot topics in our space, websites and software, access control and security. And we'll wrap it up with the question of the week. Melissa, are we ready?
I think so. Let's do this. I'm so excited.
Start us off.
All right, guys, like Tommy said, the state of the storage technology. Who wants to kind of give us just an overall picture of where we are today?
Happy to
You want to go? Yeah, go up.
Okay. Well, I'd say from my perspective, we're probably you can think about it maybe in eras, right? So when we started Sparefoot, the concept of putting your prices on the internet was something that was foreign to most. And the first few years of that back in 2008 was all about convincing people to put your prices online, right? Okay, so that was a totally different state of tech back then. And probably most people at that time were using desktop-based software, maybe just the most advanced ones were starting to think about web-based software. So then, I think that changed over the subsequent 10 years, and everyone realized they needed to put their prices online. They needed to be able to take online reservations. They probably should have web-based software, although I'm always surprised by how many people still don't have web-based software. There's a lot of people out there. And then I think that the next era that we're in now is the automation era, where we're basically trying to do as much as possible on your computer, your tablet, or your phone. And that includes signing leases, getting access to the unit, interacting in terms of customer service via text or email, really doing everything digitally. And there's different flavors of that. And Raheem and I are excited to talk about kind of some different examples of operators that do automation in different ways. But I guess that's what I'd say. The state of tech and storage today is all about utilizing automation.
Do you have anything
I would
to add
agree.
to that?
Yeah, Melissa, have you ever heard of a double wide?
Mhm.
Can you tell us what that is?
A double wide trailer?
Trailer?
No. So when people used to advertise in
Oh, yes, a double
yellow
wide in a newspaper.
Yeah.
newspaper, right?
Yes.
Or even in the telephone yellow books, right? So
I was
think
wondering where you were going with that question. to begin
technology
with.
has come a long way from where we used to do, and even that was what 15, 16
Yeah.
years ago.
It's-
And we have moved significantly. And I think as we continue to grow, and as you start seeing some of this consolidation happen, you can only do that if you tap into technology, you tap into AI, and you're able to minimize how many touch points your frontline manager is having to do to take care of the customer. And I think that's one of the things that we would love to talk about, is how do you take some of that technology that's maybe prevalent in primary markets, and at least at Minimal, one thing we have done is brought that to the secondary and tertiary markets, where people are not used to having access control gate systems, being able to rent online, being able to access their unit at any time without interacting with anybody. There's a lot of different things that have happened in technology, especially post-COVID. Technology has accelerated, over the first 2 months of COVID on what would happen over the course of 5 to 10 years happened within 2 to 3 months. And there's a lot of changes. Some of those changes are not good for everybody. I think that's the dialogue that I love to dive into, is what is good for one person and what is good for another person.
Oh, love it.
Yeah. No, I'm going to pin that thought, right? I'm going to say your words back at you, Raheem. What's good for another person may not be good for someone else. And I want to pin that as like a general theme or a general guiding principle as we have this conversation, right? Because I think the fear that I have, or like the thing that makes me cringe, is like oftentimes we get so prescriptive. Like we've all been to talks and everyone's saying, hey, this is the way to do it. And it's like, yeah, for some people, but not for everyone. So if you're sitting in the audience and you're like, hey, that doesn't make sense for my business, I'm glad you're asking that and stating that, right? So I love that. So talk to us. So you said it. I think Marcus Millichap might have put out a study that said technology has accelerated 5-7 years in those first few months. What are some of those big things, right? What are some of those big trends that's happened? I want to say last 5 years, but really last 3 years, right? Like since 2020. What are some of those biggest trends that you seen? Raheem, we'll start with you, and then same question to Chuck.
Sure. I think one of the biggest ones that's out there is just the omni-channel approach to how you handle your business, giving the customer the option of communicating with you in any way they want to do. I think prior to 2020, we were sort of locked in as that customer has to make a phone call, customer has to come to the property, a customer has to do something which is traditional. And I think post-COVID, one of the things that has accelerated immensely is, is how do you touch your customer, and what channels do you give them to talk to you and communicate with you? I think that's one of the biggest things that has accelerated. And over the course of 23, one of the things that I'm seeing is that after 21 and after 22, when we were drunk happy with leads coming in and flow of traffic coming in, people not moving out, you're starting to see a little bit of a dip in occupancy happening. The lead flow is coming down, and people are sort of running to the mountains, right? And I think it comes back to, I think that there needs to be another shift that needs to happen. And it needs to happen because we have sort of gotten drunk happy with the website that we have, and we haven't reinvested in upgrading of our websites, in upgrading of some of our technology, and getting ready for the next hurdle that's going to be coming at us. And I think that's some of the things that people need to start reinvesting in and educating themselves on as, okay, what's happening and what do I need to do next?
Yep. I think that's a great point. The other big trends I would say that are happening are obviously online rentals. That's huge. That's kind of the catalyst. You can't, if you need someone to sign a lease in the office, then you can't really automate. So that's kind of foundational in my opinion. And then, yeah, it's the communication. So it's, being able to text your customers, being able to email, but also being able to track all that and archive it and understand what the history is. So if there's a problem later, you know what happened. Paying your bills online and through your phone and with, a single click. But also being able to, I think the reality of our industry is calls are still important. I mean, almost half of all spare foot volume still happens through our call center, which is incredible. It kind of blows the mind a little bit, but calls are really, really, really important. So when you think about automation and technology, the technology that you're using to run your call center is also really important, because that's a major point, or whatever call center vendor you're using. That matters a lot too.
Wow.
I think that's a really good point. And especially right now, I don't know if you're starting to see this or not, Raheem, but customer service is definitely taking a little bit more focus in these last couple of months. Like you said, occupancy numbers have started to drop off, and we can't just kind of sit back and just wait on all the rentals to come in. We're having to actually go do something. And actually, when we answer that phone, make it a quality phone call and really sell our product. But to what Chuck said, the technology that's available, even on the management side, is super important to make sure that that all flows really well. So the automation isn't just what we're offering the customer. The automation also needs to be what is offered in-house that makes our job easier to be able to provide better customer service to the customers. So kind of
agreed. Having the ability to, as Chuck said, text with the customer. So taking some of those menial tasks off your manager, where it's automating some of the auction process, it's automating some of those responses back to those customers. So that way your team and your frontline managers are sort of focused on the sales aspect and driving leads to the property and converting on those leads, instead of trying to do all the other things. Tapping into some of that technology, some of those AI tools that we have out there. And so that way your team can refocus on what's important to your business.
So speaking of that, what technology do you guys think is necessary to have in place to make that automation truly effective?
Good website and a good PMS system. Let's start with those two first and foremost, because if we don't have those two, nothing else matters.
Yeah, agreed. And then access control and insurance and marketing like Sparefoot and Google, and payments, and the list goes at call center technology, auctions. I mean, I think that all of those things are really important. And of course, my somewhat biased pitch is that the more you can get in one place, the simpler it is, the easier it is, the more efficient it is. So that's kind of, our whole value prop is storable, right? As we make it easy by having everything together. One thing that I would note though is, in going back to your comments about being super narrow-minded about what does it mean to be automated. something Raheem and I definitely agree on is there is no one size fits all approach. And being dogmatic about automated means that there are no people in my building and that our customers will never speak to a human being ever. And so I have to have all these systems and tools in place to make that true. That's not really true. Like, we have a kind of unique view across literally 30,000 facilities. We just crossed that line this month using one of our FMS products or PMS products. And there are so many flavors of automation. And you have some people who are going all the way to the, big fancy options of putting no-key locks on every door. And you have other people who are basically putting, little plastic tags on vacant units and just leaving a lock inside. And when the tenant comes in, they just cut the plastic and take the lock out, and that's it. And there's a ton of variations in between. So I think that you have to figure out what works for your location, for your staff, or if it's just you who own the facility on your own, how much time you want to be there. It all depends, and there is no right answer. So I think having the tools that let you do what you need to do is the way to think about it, if that makes sense.
That makes all the sense. So Tanya, I love this question. Thanks for adding it to the Q&A here. So she asked, like, hey, like, what do you recommend to be run by managers versus being automated, right? And so, like, break that down for us. What are the different things that are automatable, and what are the things that you still think, would recommend having, a human be involved? So either one of y'all can take this one. Tanya, this is a great question.
I can take this. I think there's a misconception out there. So let's take care of that one first, is that unmanned does not mean unmanaged. And I think when we say automate, when we say, hey, we're going to go unmanned, it's extremely important that you need to understand that every property that does not have a manager on the property needs to be, to the nth degree, looking and feeling better than your manned properties, right? Your location with the office, it needs to look better. It needs to be pristine, because when a customer walks up to that property, there is nobody else there to sell them that property. So unless you're investing and have a program in place on how you're going to make sure that those unmanned properties are managed properly, they have the visits, the property is pristine, clean, organized. Any customer can walk up. We've seen a huge increase in millennials and Gen Z renting from us. They don't want to talk to you. They want to go through the whole process. And as Melissa said, unless there's an issue. When there's an issue, they want immediate answers. And if you're not there, do you have a plan? Have you tapped into technology so you can make sure that they get the answer and they get routed to the appropriate person so they can get immediate answers? Because if not, now you're going to get hit all over social media on how bad your performance is, how bad your property is, and you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. So it's extremely important that you approach it correctly and you have a system in place of how you're going to address different issues, different concerns, how you're going to manage a property. You need to take all of those things and make sure that all those check boxes have been checked. And as Chuck said, it's not for everybody, because you need to really dive into it and really understand where are all the bottlenecks that your customers are going to go through, and how do you make sure that you have fixed those bottlenecks.
So I mean, on those bottlenecks, Raheem, like at your level, at 181 locations, right? Y'all have who knows how many staff and how many processes and procedures and SOPs, right? So like, how do you, at that scale, even, how do you find how do you determine what are your bottlenecks, and then scale that down to an independent operator who has 1, 4, or 5 facilities? What would you advise them on how they can find these bottlenecks?
I think the biggest one that we did as an exercise is just go through the whole process as a customer, right? When you search for storage, are you able to find your listing pop up? If not, what are you doing marketing wise, website presence wise, local listing wise? How are you driving traffic to your property? And when they do land on your page, how easy is it to rent? What's the process look like? How cumbersome is that process? if people fall off during that journey, how do they, how do you ping them back? How do you get them back into the pipeline so they can finish the process? And then once they rent, how do they get their code? How do they access your property? As Chuck said, what's the access control system at your property, right? So we have sort of invested in OpenTech. So that's it gives us the visibility of every gate in North America. We can open and close anywhere from the world. So it gives us the ability, even at our unmanned properties, if somebody runs into a problem, it opens the gate up. If there's a gate that goes down before a customer calls us, we already get alerted that there's a problem happening at the property, and we've already sent people in to help out with the situation. The last thing I need is a customer calling me, telling me that there's a problem. I want to make sure that we have systems in place that can sort of, scale up those exceptions so we can get in front of it. And then once the customer gets through that, what does security look like? Do you have AI cameras that can alert you if there's nefarious activities going on the property? If somebody leaves something behind, we get alerts through our camera system. And then when the customer gets to the door, the last inch, what kind of technology have you leveraged to get through that? Do they need to have a live person there to give them access to that unit? Have you gone to just a tag system where something's just tagged and anybody can get into any unit? Or, like we do, we use DaVinci lock system. It's a low tech, because we're in primary and secondary and tertiary markets, we didn't want to rely solely on technology to the nth degree. So we use a low tech, but technology feature that's easily accessible through texting. And now the customer can get through that and has access to their unit. And then at any point, we have a chat bot, we have a call center, we have a VoIP phone system that a customer can be routed to whoever they need to. And if they get stuck at anywhere along those points, they can reach a live person and we can immediately answer.
That's really cool. Something you said there, Raheem, is, and I've heard Melissa say this at pretty much every TNSSA event, is like, have you gone through the process that your customers go through? And
That's the biggest one, because that's the biggest learning, because sometimes you find out, oh my God, this is frustrating. And then the question is, if it's frustrating for you, how are your customers going through that same process? What are they thinking?
And sometimes things break. So you need to be going through that process and checking constantly. I know, just from a software standpoint, if software rolls out an update, something likely there's a glitch somewhere in the system. It's the nature of the updates that we're constantly dealing with, or how it interacts with another system kind of gets a little wonky. So going through that process consistently is key, I think, to making the entire thing work, whether you're remotely managed or have a manager at the desk.
Totally. So Chuck, you talked about communication, right? Whether it's your call center software or your call center company, if you're working with a call center company. So talk to us a little bit about that, right? So like, Storable works with a gazillion different operators, but what are the most successful ones? How are they handling communication systems? So talk to us about all the different ways communication impacts their operations and makes their lives easier and their customers' lives easier.
Sure. So you mean from like a call answering standpoint?
All of it. Yeah. All the different ways, calls, phone systems, call centers, text messaging, all of the, talk us through what the communication stack looks like if I wanted to run a really successful storage business.
Sure. Okay. Well, it depends on how big you are, right? So if you're an operator of enough scale to be able to run your own call center, and your own call center could mean 2 agents, right? But you have to be getting enough phone calls to pay 2 people to do that. I think the folks who are doing that the best are using Call Potential, frankly. I think it's a really great tool. I think that it's specifically designed for self-storage, and it integrates into all kinds of different property management softwares, and it really enables your agents to be effective and to communicate what they need to communicate to your customers. So that's one, and then they have a bunch of different tools that help make their process even better. So I think if you're going to run your own call center, having software that is specifically designed for running a self-storage call center is important. Otherwise, you're just using generic tools. And I think we all know that self-storage is not a generic product. It requires specific vendors and specific, eccentricities, if you will, to our industry that, only someone who's focused on it is ever going to have. So I'd say that's kind of from a call center perspective. And even I'll tell you that at Sparefoot for our call center, and keep in mind, we only answer calls for people who call off of after coming to Sparefoot or one of our other sites. We don't answer on behalf of any storage facilities. We built our own custom software that is, totally designed from the bottom up to do exactly what we needed to do, which is get that person booked. And now we've added additional functionality into our software that also helps our agent walk them through doing the rental as well. Because what we found is that when the agent can get the rental done on the phone, and even if it's just texting them a link or emailing them a link, that we can increase move-in rate by 2 absolute percentage points overall for those reservations. And we're just in the first inning of this too. I think there's a lot of upside there. So that's kind of what I would say on the call center side. Then if you're using a vendor, I think, just do your homework. There's a lot of great call center vendors out there. Talk to other customers of theirs and hear what they like and what they don't like. Of course, no one's perfect. But choosing someone who's tech forward and who's investing in the customer experience in their own call center is definitely worth doing. On the customer comms part outside of that, I think having an ability to text with your customers is crucial. I think the newer generations, they don't want to call unless they have to. And so if you give them an easy way to communicate with you via text, they're going to pick that option. And so, some of our software platforms enable that natively. Others we use third-party integrations to accommodate. But in any case, I think having texting capabilities is big. Emailing is big too. And really trying to have that all routed into the same place so that your managers or whomever you have handling those comms can quickly get back to folks, because that's key. They want speed. When you text someone, you don't expect to get an answer back tomorrow. You expect to get it back now.
Yeah, I was reading Statista 2022 came out with some stats, and they were talking about how 99% of people know how to text. 93% of people will open every one of their text messages, but only 47% will open up every email.
That's high. 47 is high. Wow. 93 I can believe. I'm one of the 7%ers. I'm that monster who has 87 unread text messages.
Oh God.
That's only because you're so important, Tommy. That's why.
Gives me anxiety. I can't even.
I know.
I think Chuck and I are on the same page. If I don't know what I'm missing, right? So
it gives my wife anxiety.
Emails go unanswered. Let's just be clear about that. My emails, you need to text me and tell me you emailed me if you want me to actually open the email.
Oh my gosh.
So, I mean, and if you just listen to that conversation right there, why don't we give customers again, going back to that omni-channel approach,
Amazing.
We should be able to communicate with the customer, whichever preference they have. And sometimes we start imposing what we like or what we don't like on the customer. We should never do that. If you want to be in business, you need to take care of your customers and customers first.
That's incredible. Yeah.
Even if sometimes that means taking the technology old school or giving the customer a training lesson on, okay, let me walk you through setting up your account, because I can spend 5 minutes on the phone with you and then you're set up and every month you're going to be able to pay your bill online. But it's going to take some customer service to get them to that point. And then you could have a fantastic customer that lasts forever. But some people aren't quite willing to, they go so far onto the technology side, so far onto the automation side that they kind of forget that touch point with some of our customers. And I love what you said, Raheem, of like meeting that customer where they need to be met, wherever that may be, and giving multiple channels.
Yeah, and Chuck mentioned Call Potential. That's another company that's coming out with this great tool where you could be standing in front of an office that's inactive. They could be standing in front of a gate that is unmanned. And they have a QR code there from your phone. You just scan it, and as soon as you scan it, a live agent from a call center that's managing the Call Potential platform comes to on your cell phone, and you're able to communicate with them live.
Mm-hmm. So
It's a yeah, it's a tool that I think they're in the process of testing and potentially coming out soon.
So along those lines, what kind of changes do you guys expect to see on the technology side in the next 4 or 5 years? What are we looking at?
Yeah, that one would be the biggest one, right? Because right now, we're in the process of talking to a customer over a phone, right? But a live face-to-face, well, not live, but at least a live through technology interaction with the customer goes a long way. They're able to see you, you're able to see them, you're able to communicate with them. So if it's a baby boomer generation, the millennial generation, whichever generation you want to talk about, you're able to communicate with them with whichever format they prefer.
No, that's killer. There's some great questions around communications. Before we leave this, Melissa, is it cool? I'm going to ask some of these questions.
Yeah.
One is directed directly to you, Raheem. Scott asks, Raheem, do you have any stats for frequency that your customers interact with you online via chatbot? What's the most common task that the chatbot addresses? Yeah, talk to Scott about this. And honestly, while we're at it, what chatbot do you use?
So one I would recommend would be Swivel. I think they've really come into the self-storage industry, and really as another thing that Chuck mentioned is you really need to understand self-storage. So if you don't understand self-storage, there's a learning curve that you have to go through. And Swivel, I think, that has done one of the best jobs out there of truly understanding the self-storage market and driving the business forward. Their AI tool has sort of taken into thousands and thousands of answers and questions that people have asked, and already has come up with some of those answers. So when a customer comes in, it can learn from those previous answers and is able to communicate with that customer. Currently, I believe 86% of our of the text answers that the chatbot is interacting with is automatically answered. And out of those 86%, 50% of those customers are interested in storing, and they just need an answer so they can continue their self-storage journey. And what we're currently doing, or what we have done in the past, is a customer asks a question and now they hit a wall. They have to stop and they have to wait for whoever's on the other side to respond back. That could be 3 hours, that could be a day. And until then, the customer's sort of in limbo. The one thing that your chatbot does is gives them immediate answer so they can continue their journey to rental.
That's killer.
I like that.
Yeah. Another one, this one is maybe this one be a good one for Chuck. So like Christina asked, like when let's say you're starting from zero when it comes to sprinkling in technology and automation. So like, what should I be thinking about automating first if I'm just getting started? That's a great question, Christina.
Good question. Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to a similar answer to before. There definitely are stages, but first things first, software integrated with a website that lets you do online rentals. That's step one.
Yep. Chef's kiss.
Mm-hmm. Nice and simple.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
Can't do anything if you don't have the foundation. That's your foundation, right? So everything gets built on top of that. You look at call potentials integrated into SiteLink. So that's why it works well. Swivel is integrated into SiteLink, your PMS system. So it works well. So you can layer on other technology on top of it. But if you don't have a solid PMS system and you don't have a solid website to drive traffic, you can't do anything else.
Nope. Yeah, that's amazing. Well, that's a good segue into kind of our next topic, which is websites and software, right? So I think, Raheem, your answer to the foundations of technology, what is it? And you said you have your software, you have your website, and I think Chuck threw in access control as kind of like the trifecta, right, of that foundation. So talk about big operators and small operators, but let's talk about what are successful operators? How are they using their website? Chuck, you've already tapped into online rentals, but like maybe break that down. Like, what is an online rental? I still talk to, we're in the website business and we're in the online rental business. I still talk to a lot of operators who actually don't really know what I mean when I say rent a storage unit online, right? So like, maybe let's start there. Break that down. What is an online rental for self-storage?
Yeah, so to me, online rental is, well, the ultimate result is that you have the ability to sign a lease and make a payment online without having to go in the office to do that. And then, I think the advanced version is you can also get your gate code and go directly to the unit without having to talk to anyone at all. So to me, that's online rentals, but not everyone wants to rent online, right? So we typically don't recommend a process where that's the only option for your customer on the website. You want to let them make a reservation or do an online rental. And we've had a lot of success kind of doing, you can reserve, and then even after you reserve, it'll give you an option to complete the rental. We're giving them both options up front. And yeah, again, it goes back to meeting your customer where they're at, but having that option is crucial. And then also having the option for maybe someone made a reservation and then they call your manager, and your manager knows, hey, I want to try to get them to sign this thing online. They have a button that's easy to push in the software or a link that's easy for them to send. They can text it or email it right to the customer. Customer can complete it and get it done before they ever come down to the store.
Incredible. Yeah. And Chris, I mean, to add to more, website functionality, Crystal had a comment earlier about, they have FAQs on their website, right? Which is a really powerful and probably underutilized tool. And so I think that's really killer. Raheem, anything you'd add to that as far as like website functionality? Like what makes the mini mall website so cool and so awesome?
Just making it as simple as possible for the customer to give you their information. Sometimes we just overcomplicate things, and the customer's not able to give you the data that they need. So as soon as they start giving us pieces of information, we start collecting that information. So even if they don't finish the rental, we've already gotten some pieces of the information so we can continue that journey. We can reach out to them. We can ping them back going, hey, you left your cart. You left it at this stage. You want to come back and finish your journey, right? So those are some of the things that we have sort of utilized our website to do is, where if the customer has decided to jump and go in a different direction, we're able to go back and have that conversation. In today's era, especially with where leads are starting to, soften up a little bit, occupancies are heading in a different direction than where they were in 21 and 22. Every lead is important, and you need to nurture every one of those. So we take pride in making sure that everybody that lands on the website, we know who they are, we know how to get a hold of
them. Can I answer another question that's in here that is related to this? I think dovetails nicely. This is a question from Danielle about how many days do you typically let a tenant reserve a unit? I think it's related to what Raheem is saying, because Raheem's point is get every tenant, every lead you possibly can. So something I see operators doing all the time at Sparefoot is severely limiting the number of days in advance that they'll let someone reserve a unit. And they'll say, well, I don't want to reserve a unit for more. I don't want to let someone reserve it for more than a week, because what if I have a tenant come in and they want to rent that unit right there and I've got it, already reserved. To me, that is, that's not how I would do it, because what happens, and I can tell you this with 100% certainty because we deal with it all the time, when you restrict your reservation window down that low, then our agents, or even when someone's shopping online, a customer's going to come look at your store. They're going to have a move-in date that's 2 weeks out, and they're going to say, oh, well, I guess I can't go to this facility, and move on. You just lost that customer. Now, my view is always like, you should let them reserve for 60 days out. That's what we recommend. Not that many people do that, but that's what I think you should do. And then if you do have a situation where someone comes in to rent a unit and it's already reserved, I would probably rent it to that person, and then you call the person who's on the wait list and you work something out with them to get into a different unit at the facility. And maybe you give them a deal for a period of time if it's a bigger unit or something like that. But you gotta take both birds that are in the hand at either time, and not try to optimize too far to perfection, I guess would be my view on it.
Yeah, Danielle, good question. Raheem, what do y'all do at Mini Mall? Do you have any science behind your reservation windows?
No, we don't. We prescribe to what Chuck is talking about as the prime example is bird in hand is better than two in the bush, right? It's if I have a lead, I want to close now. And I think there's a lot of people out there that won't even take reservations as they go into the rental season, because they're like, whoa, they can either rent or that's it. And no, we prescribe to that is I want every lead. So that gives me power to push somebody else, you know. I might not rent to them right away, but I might call that other customer back and say, hey, I have somebody else that's willing to rent that 10 by 10 right now. And you're not renting for another 2 weeks. I need to release this unit right now. I'm going to rent it to them. And maybe in the next 2 weeks, something else pops up and I'll reach out to you. But this person's here. They're ready to rent.
Yeah. And Katie asked, I mean, honestly, Chuck, if you have this stat, that'd be awesome to pull out of the air. What are the conversion rates on these 60-day windows? Like, let's say I do reserve, it's May, let's say I do reserve a unit for July 7th. You know, do you have stats on when it's a reservation that far out, what those conversions look like?
The best part I have on that is nobody rents 100%. That's a fact. All right. There's nobody out there that's renting units 100%. So I rather go with a customer that's in front of me that's ready to rent than a customer that's sitting there pending, waiting. It just doesn't work. So I want to collect that data. I want to know who that person is. So I can make informed decision which route I want to go.
That's a cool nuance, Raheem. I love that. Yeah, Chuck, any commentary on the 60-day window there?
I'd have to look it up. I don't have that off the top of my head. I mean, for sure, the move-in rates are higher for, you know, if I go online and reserve with the move-in date of today, that is a higher move-in rate than 60 days. No doubt about it. I don't know exactly what it is, but you know, the other side of Raheem's point is even if the move-in rate is lower than 60 days, still better than not getting that lead at all because you didn't have your window available at that time.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Melissa, where do we even go? There's so many good questions in the Q&A. I'm scrolling through these.
There are, but I really like on our, I think we got to tackle our software next.
I think we do. Go. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
some of these questions are related to software. So
Yeah, exactly. So we've talked a lot about how website and software, that's the foundation. And if you don't have that right and it's not working well, you can't really build very effectively off of that. So tell us about what a good software should do for you.
So
Chuck, I'll let you handle that one.
Okay.
Thought you might.
There's a long list of things that your software should do for you, but I think first and foremost, it needs to be flexible and it needs to let you run your business the way you want to run your business. And that's the challenge and the beauty of building software products is that they have to be able to do so many different things, so many different ways. And, you know, take a look at SiteLink. It has 20 years of features and functionality built into it. It can, you dream it, it can do it pretty much. And, you know, StoreEdge is getting there too. And then you have Easy, which is a little bit of a different flavor, which is more of a simple solution, not so configurable and customizable. And you more kind of have to do it the way that the system works. And that works for a lot of people. We've got 10,000 facilities using Easy Storage solutions now, which is pretty amazing. So I think it just depends. Do you need to run a bespoke type of process to run your business, or do you need to just make it easy and simple? And that kind of dictates your software choice. But again, I think it needs to be web-based. It needs to be able to integrate with lots of different products. You obviously need to be able to take payments. You need to be able to connect to websites, integrate with access control, auctions, call center software, different call center providers. You know, I think just the more functionality that it has and the more flexibility that it offers is the right way to choose a software product. And of course, again, I'm biased. I think we have the best ones, but that's how I would think about it.
Raheem, anything to add to that?
No, I think Chuck sort of hit all the points there.
No, I love it. So let's ask some of these software related questions.
Let's do it.
That feel good? All right. So Jim Barry. Oh, this one's an interesting one. This is kind of automation, kind of operations, kind of maintenance. Love this question. So is Storable going to roll out a functionality for a manager walkthrough or on remote unmanned facilities? So basically something that allows owners to know that the remote manager has done the walkthrough and can track their time at the facilities to optimize the employee ratio to store. thoughts on a kind of like a maintenance tracker? Is that, Jim, is that a good summary of what you're asking for here? Yeah. So any thoughts on maintenance tracking, Chuck?
Yeah, it's something that we definitely do get asked about. And we have walkthrough capabilities today, of course, but not specifically designed for remote walkthrough where you can time track and things like that. So I don't think we have specific plans to do that at the moment, but I saw your question come in and I thought it was a really interesting idea that I'm definitely going to pass along to our product team.
Yeah. What else, Melissa? You see any other software-based questions here?
Okay. So Jim Ross said step 1 is software and website integration as the foundation. What would be the natural flow of steps for owners to take to really have an efficient operation?
I think we talked about that also earlier, is, after the website and the PMS, which is the foundation, you build from there, right? So do you want to give your customers the ability to access your property, be able to open and close the gate from anywhere? What visibility do you have of your property? What tools, what technology have you used to be able to supervise your property even if you're not there? What technology have you used so they can get through the last inch, that is the door? So those are all the things that you can start layering on top. And then if you want to go above and beyond, would be what tools and technology are you leveraging so your manager can focus on what is truly driving the business versus just the manual task of day-to-day operations.
Okay.
Ooh, okay. Jim, good
Dane?
question. Yeah.
Daniel has a question in here too. What accounting system are the larger operators using along with the PMS?
Ooh, I never think about accounting systems. Yeah. So Mini Mall, what do y'all use for the accounting system behind the scenes?
We use Yachty.
Okay. Yep.
There's a wide range.
There's a wide one. It's sort of based on what what we're used to and what you're comfortable with. If the accounting software is driving your decisions, I think we got the wrong issue at this point.
That's a good point.
Yeah, probably is a good point.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
There is one thing to note on accounting, though, that I will throw out there is, well, first of all, if you looked at all of Sorable's customers, it's like probably 80% QuickBooks. So just the answer to the question is most people are using QuickBooks.
Okay. Keep it simple.
But for larger operators, it's much more spread out across things that range from Yardi to Sage to Great Plains to all kinds of things. One recent partnership we've developed is with another company called Acumatica, and they are a cloud-based ERP accounting system, and they've actually integrated directly into our API for both SiteLink and StoreEdge. So you don't have to download data and upload it into the accounting system. It just automatically flows through, and that is a new innovation that hasn't existed before. And they had to build that integration out specifically for us. So it's not a cheap piece of software, and you need to be a pretty big operator to afford it. But if you are, it's a pretty interesting option.
Awesome. No, it's killer. I guess while we're on this topic of software, and I want to get to access control because I think that's part of the trifecta, right? Give some advice here, right? Especially if we're thinking about using technology to run a better business. How do owners and operators take more advantage of their software, right? I mean, the old adage is like you only use 5% of SiteLink or 5% of web self-storage or whatever software platform you're using, right? How do I use more than 5% of my brain? Can I use, like give me advice here.
Is that from you, Raheem?
Either.
I'll let you take it, sir.
Chuck, it's all yours.
Software is all you.
All right. Well, I think definitely the most underutilized functionality of our software platforms in general is revenue optimization and revenue management. The vast majority of storage operators still do not manage their prices or increase their prices on existing tenants specifically. And so, it's just leaving money on the table. And I guess the way I like to frame it is there's a lot of companies out there looking to buy storage facilities, and the best kind of facility that they can buy is someone who hasn't changed their rates in 20 years, doesn't sell insurance, doesn't do anything on the internet. Like, they want to buy that because it means you've massively under optimized your business, and they can buy it and start making a lot more money than you were. So to me, that's what you should be doing. Like, start with rate management. And then of course, do the other things I just mentioned too. But there's, again, there's a million different things. There's two-way texting. There's, efficiencies you can have in your lean process. There's the quality of the communications that you send out and making them look good. There's all kinds of good stuff. And we have at Storable, vast kind of information on our site about the different features and functionalities of our software that you can read about, watch videos on, to better understand and take advantage of. So, invest the time in doing that, and you can really learn how to best use the software.
I love it.
I think we could talk about
if you don't have a
software.
website, you don't have revenue management, you're not marketing well, please call Raheem.
If you're 100% full and proud of it, please call me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think that, I think that's a great point. It's revenue management is a science and an art, and there's folks out there that are still stuck in legacy thinking and are still trying to manage to occupancy. You can't take occupancy to the bank. You take revenue to the bank,
Yeah.
and you have to drive revenue correctly. Oh, well, I can't do rate increases because my asking price is higher than the customer's paying. Wait, hold on. There's a huge problem here. Why is your asking price lower than what the current customer is paying? There's already a red flag for me before we go into anything else. So it's just those kind of things that I think a lot of owner operators leave on the table, is they just don't know how to manage both at the same time. And it's sort of like, do I chew or do I walk? Which one do I do? And in the self-storage industry, you need to be able to do both. That's one of the reasons why this industry is doing so well. And I think all the consolidation, all of the different things that are happening because of that. Is there are people that are able to do that at an extremely high level. And that's another thing I love about our industry, is we share this knowledge. We share it freely. I've gone to webinars, I've gone to different conferences, and we share all of this wealth of information, and people sit there, listen, and then they go away and do the same exact thing, and they never change. And I think that needs to be one of the big things that we need to do, is we take notes, we learn, but then we don't go back and execute it back at our properties. And I think that's something we need to start getting better at.
That does hurt my heart the most. Usually we'll talk about Google Business or whatever, and it's like, hey, this phone number is clearly wrong, right? And then 3 months later, when I talk to them again, it's still the wrong number. And it's like, man, this was a 12-second fix that would have saved you or earned you thousands of dollars, and not frustrate your customers as much, right? So that point is I'm glad you brought that up, because that does hurt my heart the most, is when we're unable to go make things happen. Melissa, I think you had a point about this.
Well, I think with revenue management, a lot of people overcomplicate it. Yes, there's a science to it, but it's not really that difficult. And if you are a single or, maybe 2 or 3 property owner, your spreadsheets and your scientific process is not going to look, as intricate as, say, Extra Space or CubeSmart. All you need is just a process. This is not hard. It's just that I think so many owners just don't know where to start. And they say, you know what, I'm full, money's coming in, life is good. And they don't even think to dig any further. And anytime they do hear conversation about revenue management, it is so overly complicated that they're like, nope, not going to touch it. I don't even know where to start with that, or I need some fancy software to tell me what to do. And you really don't. So I think sometimes we make storage harder than it needs to be. So that's just
one interesting stat that's kind of related to this whole conversation, that just shows what is possible out there and what operators are doing. So across all facilities that use Storable, the average new unit rental rate right now, or for the month of April, was $99. Okay, which incidentally is down from like 116 last year. So that's a separate topic. We don't need to go there right now. $99. The average in-place rental rate is 145. So new tenants are coming in 50% lower than existing tenants. And that's because revenue management is being done, but that's very skewed because people at the, at the more sophisticated end of the market are doing it way more than the smaller mom and pops. And really, again, it's just that those numbers could be even more if people were really doing revenue management the way they could be.
Well, and my last point about this, we've all had occupancy drop off this last 6 to 8 months, right? Many of us, though, that have been doing rate management the right way, our revenue's actually up. Occupancy's down, revenue's up. But if you haven't been doing that, then you're not seeing those same results. And right now you're like chewing on your fingernails thinking, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Because you haven't been managing your rates right. So if that's you, pick up the phone later today and call one of us. Because we'd love to talk to you about this. So yeah, it's really an easy answer. So
let's see if we can talk about access control, right? Because I feel like we'd be remiss to have a tech summit where we don't get to talk about the actual hardware side of the technology piece. We've been very, on the soft side. So let's talk about access control a little bit.
Yeah, let's just start with you guys. Just describe access control and what it looks like at the state-of-the-art facility. What are we seeing?
Going back, the ability to open a gate from anywhere, from a customer coming up to the gate access control system, and the phone and the system recognizing that that is a customer associated with this property and giving them the prompt to open the gate without having to get out of the car and punch up a code. So all of those features should be available. And then the third, but not the last, is the ability for them to give you an alert back if your gate is open for more than 10 minutes or so, right? So that way you are aware of a problem before a customer contacts you.
I like it.
That's cool. Yeah.
I would also add, what we hear with customers of our access control product that they love the most is when a delinquent tenant tries to get in, we send them a text that says, hey, you're delinquent, you need to pay now, click this link, pay, then they get in. That is an action that would have previously required them to go into the office, talk to someone, spend time, manually make a payment, and instead the whole thing can be solved in 30 seconds on their phone.
Wow. Yeah. So I mean, touch on expand a little further on how really good access control can actually really improve the customer experience. That's one example, right? So I haven't paid my bill out, let's say it's Friday night. I don't have to wait till Monday to access my things. Within seconds, I can get my, access my things. What are some of the other things that it does for the customer's experience, when they're interfacing and interacting with the storage facility?
So a feature we're rolling out soon is text to open. So you'll be able to roll up to the gate and just basically text a number and it'll automatically recognize your phone number. And so it'll just open the gate. Other providers like OpenTech, and they have an app that you can use that basically does a similar thing. I think that's a big deal for tenants, just, ease of getting in.
Okay, and that's still really secure because if they're not texting, if someone else, they have to have your phone in order to text that number to get in. Okay, all right, I like that.
Yeah,
interesting.
That's fancy. And I'd imagine, the passcode on the phone theoretically would be stronger, or maybe the same as the passcode on the gate code. Yeah, no, that's cool. All right. Yeah. Raheem, as far as like at Mini Mall, are y'all like, what are some of the other quote unquote smart technologies are you guys experimenting with or checking out?
Well, one of the ones that we haven't talked about that's readily available, and I think a lot of folks don't use, and this sort of helps with managerial tasks. So your managers can sort of focus on the customer. Is there's the Our Post and Simply Certified. Have you ever heard of those two names before? So our post, you can start communicating with the customer through email. It's a certified email that goes out. You can communicate with them for auction, for lien letters, for rent increases, all of those kind of things. You can also use, and if they don't have an email, then you can use Simply Certified, which is a mailing service. It's connected to your PMS system, and you can just click on customer, or you can click all your customers and hit send, and the mailing house will send the letter out on your behalf. So both of those technology pieces, one is utilizing email, the other one is utilizing a mailing service. So your manager does not leave the office and have to go print a bunch of pages, put it in envelopes, go to the post office, stamp it, mail it. Don't have to do any of that stuff. You can do any of those items, outsource this, let technology do it for you.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah, and SiteLink, those, we have integrations with different providers that do that. In storage, it's actually natively built in, so you don't even have to have an integration. It just automatically happens as part of your software. But yeah, that's a huge efficiency gain for sure.
Holy cow. Melissa, how do y'all, when y'all were using like other softwares, were these things pretty widely integrated with other platforms as well?
We use our post a lot.
Okay.
Really like them. That works especially nice for those the meaner letters that you have to send to the tenant that you're like, no, you cannot do this on my property, and I'm going to send you this email, and I'm going to have tracking to prove to everyone that yes, you did get it. Yes, you actually did open it. So I really love those features of our post, and we use that quite a bit.
Okay. Okay. Now at the conferences this year, New Orleans and ISS, there's been a lot of hoopla being made around smart locks, smart units, unit tracking, all these other things. So like, are these technologies worth it? Is this worth looking into in 2023? And what's the outlook over the next, 3 to 5 years?
And I think goes back to the earlier conversation we had is, you sort of have to look at your property and look at it from there. You can go with no key, which is Bluetooth, and give you that full access, full control, and takes the technology to the nth degree. But for us, because we're in the secondary and tertiary markets, we've sort of gone with the DaVinci low tech technology piece that sort of uses text messaging to communicate back and forth and for the customer to get the code. DaVinci lock system is tied into Storable, so they're able to communicate, able to pull in that this is the same customer that that signed the lease, and they're able to get the code. And with that code, 4-digit code, they're able to open their lock and get access to their unit. So it works great. It doesn't matter if I have in the boonies, if I don't have internet, or if I don't have service. It doesn't make any difference. And we're able to overlock customers. We're able to lock new units, so we don't have crimes and different issues going on, and our property stays secure. So those are all things that we've sort of utilized that are low tech, but still gets us access to the customer gets access to their unit.
Okay, so to follow up on this last bit of access control and technology, what technology do you guys feel is essential to have in place that keeps your facility secure?
We've sort of implemented a AI camera system, and our camera system, I think that's one of the questions that was also asked is, how do you know if a customer walks up and drives up to your gate and drives away? So we have the AI system triggered in such a way where if a customer comes up to the gate and the gate does not open, we know how many of those customers have come and gone. We know, we get alerted whenever a customer leaves something behind. So it recognizes in the camera system that there's units, and then there's bushes, and that is it. That's in the camera view. And if somebody leaves behind a mattress or leaves behind a sofa, we immediately get alerted on, hey, here's a picture, here's who left it behind, and we're immediately able to contact that customer. Where we can do searches by color, we can do searches by, it also, I think there was another question is about employees. So it does facial recognition. So we actually have inputted who are the managers of the property. So we get alerted when a manager shows up at a property, we get alerted when the manager leaves the property.
Incredible.
That's
Andrew,
pretty cool.
just in the chat there, what's the AI camera system that you're using, Raheem?
Sorry, you're breaking up. I can't hear you.
I love this.
It's a mini mall version.
There we go. So Andrew, it's proprietary. I love that so much. So Jim Davidson, I think Raheem kind of touched on your little concern there. Hang out to the end. These questions in the Q&A are fabulous, and I want to, especially if Raheem and Chuck could spend a little bit more time with us. I want to dive into some of these. Jolia, thank you. Yep, Rhombus makes a system as well. But next 3 minutes. Welcome to the lightning round. Y'all literally have 12 seconds. I'm going to cut you off, and let's get into the lightning round. So I'm going to start with Chuck here. If you're building, and some of these we may have already answered, but that's okay. Give us the summary version. If you're building a new facility today, what's the essential tech stack you're choosing?
Software, website, access control.
Sold.
There you go. All right.
I would add one more. DaVinci would be the fourth one I would add. That way the customer can get through the full experience.
Love it.
Good point.
That's great. Okay, next question. If you have had a facility for 10 years, what would be the first tech that you would update or improve?
Ooh.
I'd probably
Website.
give you the same answer.
There you go. So website. Yeah.
Yep.
What did you say, Chuck? You cut out on me.
I'd probably say same answer.
Same answer,
I'd
same
evaluate the
order,
whole thing.
everything. Yeah.
Next up, if someone is looking to buy a facility, what's the biggest tech gotcha to look out for, and how do you budget for it?
The two that I would give is, number one is if you want to go to a no-key Bluetooth technology, the best time to do it was when you're building it, because trying to install it in an existing property, it just creates a nightmare. So if you want to try to budget and try to build something, the best time to do a no-key, a Bluetooth access control system is when you're building. So that's one thing I would do. And the number two is just making sure that your camera system has AI technology and that can really take your management level to the next, the next level.
There we go. Call Raheem.
Oh gosh. You got the next one, Tommy?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There we go. Is there any technology that the REITs use that independent operators should also be using? I love that one.
I'll bring
Yeah.
that one.
You can't
Revenue
say your
management.
camera system.
No, they're all using that, but revenue management is definitely the biggest one. I think that the REITs do really, really well that we all struggle with, right? So they, and there are definitely options out there for everyone to utilize to leverage that to the next level. And as Melissa said earlier, I think people just sort of have that deer in the headlight look and they just don't jump into it. It's not that complicated. It's just much more you just have to be consistent in whatever process you're using. And there's definitely multiple different revenue management systems out there that you can leverage. Just do it.
Just do it. Nike.
Yeah.
All right. So what technology are you guys expecting or interested in seeing come to the self-storage industry?
I think we're just scratching the surface and just seeing the very tip of the iceberg as it relates to AI. And internally at Storable, we are making some big investments in figuring out how to leverage AI to really propel this industry forward. And I can't even tell you exactly what form or fashion that's going to take yet, but I think over the next 5 years, it's going to be big.
Very cool.
It's a solid 12-second answer. And last but not least,
Chat GPT, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
Chat GPT. I was actually talking to somebody that was losing about $900 a month, and so gave them advice to launch AI, and he signed up for the $20 per month version of Chat GPT. And he called me the other day and told me that it just changed his life. He's now losing $920 per month.
I was wondering where you were going with that. Incredible. All right.
That's awesome.
Last but not least, in our lightning round, is there any new or coming technology that you're just not really sold on? Is there anything out there that's just like, I could pass?
I just answered that question.
It's amazing. Chuck,
Raheem has you got to just wait to see what's coming. Don't worry, it's going to be great.
I love it. I love it. Chuck, not to put any companies on blast, but is there anything that that you think could use a little bit more development before it should be utilized by the masses?
You know, nothing comes to mind that seems like so crazy right now that I've seen coming out of late. I've been impressed with a lot of the new technology innovations across the board, to be honest.
I concur. I think there's a lot of cool stuff in our industry, and like Raheem said earlier, like we've accelerated 5, 7, 10 years in a short period of time. So I'd anticipate even more cool stuff coming around the corner. Melissa, this was this is the first time we've ever done lightning round where the speakers actually gave 12-second answers. So
Yeah, you guys did really good.
proud of y'all.
Great job.
So that takes us to our final segment, which is our question of the week. This one is I think, speak to the industry, speak to the people who are already here, right? There's a lot of folks in the audience who are looking to buy their first facility, but I see a lot of familiar names who've been in industry for 5, 10, 20, even 30 years. Speak to us. What are the industry's biggest technology blind spots? Raheem, we'll start with you, sir.
Two things that come to mind is, again, revenue management, and then just all the teachings and all the learnings that you will hear at the various different conferences. You have to take it back and go execute, because there's nothing technology that can that's going to help you unless you go execute it.
Mm.
I would say just the concept of experimentation, because what technology lets you do is run lots of experiments. So you can try different strategies with revenue management. You can try different strategies with customer communications, different lead follow-up strategies, different website copy, different ad copy. And if you don't have an active mindset of like, I want to be constantly experimenting and optimizing, then your blind spot is that you are leaving potential on the table. So that's what I would say to that question.
Amazing.
I have
Melissa?
something to add to that. Yeah. I think it just kind of goes off what you said, Chuck. We kind of have a mindset of set it and forget it a lot in this industry, and you cannot do that with technology.
No.
One, it will break. When
Yeah.
you least expect it, it will break.
Yeah.
So,
But everyone else, yes,
oh,
for
of
sure.
course, never a storable product. But seriously, all technology breaks, because it's only as good as what the person who is implementing all the pieces on the backside make it be. And you have to constantly be on that. Don't just set it up and walk away from it and think you're good. Always have another set of eyes on it.
Yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It'll work until it breaks, and then you have to fix it, right? So I think I love that, right? And I think the nature of a blind spot is like it's a blind spot because you don't see it, and if you're not looking, kind of Chuck, what you're saying about experimentation. If you're not looking, then it will stay a blind spot, and it'll hit you in the face one day, right? And Raheem, go and call back to what you said at the beginning of like, have you rented a storage unit at your facility? Have you gone through what your customers go through, right? So I love that. So y'all, thanks for a lively conversation, man. This has been incredible. So speakers, speak to us real quick. How do people find you? Raheem, you keep telling people to call you. What's your phone number?
630-660-2637. And email is Raheem@minimallstorage.com.
Incredible. Find you. Find Raheem. He's a wealth of knowledge, as you've seen, and not only a wealth of knowledge though, but like very generous with his time. I've seen Raheem sit down with someone for hours explaining things to them. So incredible. Chuck, likewise, what's the, as the CEO of Storable, is there, what's the pathway to get to you, or what's the best way to learn more about Storable products?
Chuck at storable.com is the best way to get to me. And if you want to, I can always direct you to the right person, or if you, are a brand new person to Storable, then you can kind of go on through our website. Or if you're someone who already knows storable support, or your account managers, of course, you can always go through them. But yeah, my email is just real simple, chuck@storable.com if you have any questions for me.
There you go. And both these guys are 0 inbox, 0 unread guys. So
I wish.
I am not a 0 inbox guy. I am not a 0 unread messages guy. And I thrive this way. So, but y'all, seriously, thank you for coming out. Of course, this session and every session's available on storageplug.com/resources. Join the conversation that's happening on Facebook with the Gabfocus Facebook fans group. And of course, this episodes are going to be available on Spotify and all the places that you listen to podcasts on the official Gabfocus Self-Storage podcast. And then last but not least, we already have June's agenda scheduled, optimizing your day-to-day. So a lot of this stuff that we talked about here at the Tech Summit, we're going to talk about how you can actually use this in more detail at the day-to-day level. So y'all, again, thank you. Melissa, as always, you're incredible. Thank you for co-hosting with me.
you.
All right, everyone.
Thank you for the invite. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Yep, you
Thanks,
guys were
Melissa. Thanks,
great.
Tommy.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye, y'all.
Amazing.
Bye, everyone.
Awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you, guys. That was all. We went a little over. Thank you for being so generous with your time. If you
17
have-
minutes.
Yeah. If you do have a little bit more time, though, there are some really cool questions in here. Chuck, Raheem, you guys have just a few more minutes to answer some of the questions that are still in the Q&A.
Sure.
Yeah,
Cool.
I can stick around for a little while.
Cool. Well, Melissa, we want to just take turns going from the top down?
Yeah. So the first one, how is Sparefoot better for business promotion than Google or Yelp ads and promos?
So I would say I'll answer that in two parts. One, I think it is often better because it is more cost effective and you're only paying for an actual rental versus paying for clicks or some other, risky investment, if you will. That being said, I would never recommend to anyone that they only use Sparefoot. They should do every profitable marketing channel that they can find. So it should be done in conjunction with everything else you're doing.
There we go. Raheem, would you add anything to that, or?
No, I would agree. I think you're paying for leads on Google, you're paying for a rental on Sparefoot. That would be the big differentiation, and you should use both in tandem with each other. We see properties that do really well on Sparefoot. We have other properties that do really well on Google. So you leverage whatever works for you.
Amazing. Yeah. I'll say this. I won't speak to the channel, but I'll talk about the end result of each channel. I actually met with a great operator. They have 30 locations right before Gabfocus. And we just did a little review of their marketing funnel. And we discovered that more than 40% of their leads were expiring. So you do all of this work to get a lead and they don't get followed up on. And that hurt my heart. I was like, hey, did you know this? And the person didn't. And I was like, okay, let's have a bigger meeting. It's not just a marketing problem. Let's call in operations. Let's call in the owner.
It goes back to that test that we talked about earlier. Is you gotta not just go through the rental process, but what happens if you become a lead? How fast does your team call you back?
Exactly.
Are they calling you back in an appropriate manner? Do random tests and random surveys on a regular basis, because today they might be doing a great job, but that a picture, a snapshot is not a picture, for life. So you need to make sure that nothing has changed and continuously be testing and researching what your team is doing on the front lines. They are the ones that are interacting with your customers every day, and you want to make sure that you have people that are fanatical about closing on the front lines.
Amazing. Yeah. Allison Brooks asked another Storable related question. Does Storable have any plans to create an app for customers to access for storage or site link? Are there plans to add a license scan feature for online move-ins with storage or site link? Are there any plans to combine storage and site link into one platform? Ooh, all three very good questions.
So the first one on an app, we do not have active plans to develop an app, although we are always improving our mobile experiences. So we kind of think about it like we'd rather invest in a mobile experience that's more accessible without having to download something on your phone. So expect mobile across all of our platforms to constantly improve over time. And even with access control, we have made the explicit decision that instead of investing in an app, we are doing the text to open. Because again, just going back to the simple, we don't want to have to make someone download an app to do it. This way it's accessible to 100% of phones day one. So no on app for now. Could change in the future, but that's the current plan. Second one, what was the second question?
Scanning an ID during an online move-in.
Yeah, so we're doing a big overhaul to online move-ins in general right now. And so step one is to get that rolled out. And then once we do that, the driver's license functionality is scheduled to be enhanced as well. So that's that one. And then are we ever going to combine site link and storage in one? Unequivocally, no. They are independent platforms. They will never be merged. We'll never force you to move from one to the other. We continue to invest in both of them. They both have, strengths and weaknesses. But overall, if you ever have any questions about which one makes the most sense for your operation, feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to walk you through it.
There you go. Heard it from the man himself. He's a very well answered.
All right. Advertisement is a hard thing to run as a manager. As far as automation, is there any way you would recommend to make advertisement an easier task? Integrating automation or AI assistance?
Tommy.
ChatGPT is a great way to write ad copy.
Danger, danger, danger. No, I'll say this, Crystal, like they're depending on what your marketing channels are, right? The one easy thing to do is get all your data in one place, right? So that you can have everything at a glance. So there are a plethora of dashboard tools out there that just pull all your data, your Google business data, your Google analytics data. If you run ads, your ads data, right? If you have social media, which is not always something I would recommend for everyone, but if you are running social media, pull that in too, right? So there's a handful of tools out there that kind of pull all that data together. So even if you don't know what that data means, it's nice to have that data in one place. So yes, I think if I were a manager and I'm thinking about how to improve my marketing prowess, that would be where I would start. Yep. Janice, great question here. You talked about the needs of Gen X, but how do you provide services to those who are not tech savvy or are in different generations who actually want that one-on-one interaction?
I think we answered that question when we talked about call potential.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that after 2020, I couldn't even believe some of the the legacy generation learn how to do scan QR codes. And you go to every restaurant, everybody trained them on how to do and execute that. And I love what call potential is going to be doing, in the process of testing is taking a QR code, scanning a QR code and be able to talk to a live agent face to face. I think that really brings in all kinds of communication from all.
Yeah, no, honestly, I thought QR codes were gonna die, right? Like 2018, no one.
They were
resurrected.
They were okay. In fact, they were dead.
Yeah.
And then all
The greatest comeback story of all time.
Yeah.
So I think Janice, Raheem, to add to that, yeah, I think more than 50% of rentals still happen through phone and drive-in, right? And so as long as you're available and as long as you have a call system, whether it's you or your own staff answering or having it outsourced, as long as you make yourself available, then yeah.
It's never using one system, one platform, one thing across the board. It's always looking for that omni-channel approach. So a customer that wants to text can talk to you that way. Customer that wants to email can talk to you that way. Customer that wants to talk to you live face-to-face is able to do that. If customer wants to talk to you on the phone, they need to be able to do that. If you're in business, you need to be in business to take care of customers any way they want to communicate with you.
Incredible.
I think that's something we miss. We think that we can only go this way or we can only go this way. It's not. We have enough technology out there that you can leverage all of it and do it to the best of your ability.
Amen. All right. As the Storable CEO, what are some things that you were surprised to learn as the business grew?
Is that for me?
Yes, totally.
Oh, man, the list is way too long, but I would say just, as we've grown and become such a significant presence in the industry, I think what has maybe been a little unexpected is just the responsibility that comes with that and expectations. And it's not just about, you can't just focus on your company and growing it the way you want to. We now have like a huge influence over literally millions of people and their livelihoods. And it's our responsibility to make sure that we're shepherding that responsibility appropriately and investing in it the right way to improve everyone's lives and make their technology experiences better. And it's just kind of a different way of thinking about it than you might have thought, or than we might have thought of, in the early days.
Wow, love that. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, Jim Barry. Good question here. Can you effectively do value or popcorn pricing on units in an unmanned environment if there's not a manager to upsell the units?
If you have a great website, you can. Right. So we do value pricing online. We have 30 to 40% of our customers that willingly choose graded price when they're left to their own measures.
Mhm.
Wow.
I agree.
Yeah, I love it.
All right.
And here,
would you
so here's a couple other stats for you. When a call center trained person gets in front of them, then that number moves up to 50%. And here's the scariest one. When a manager, a frontline office manager, interacts with that same customer, that number drops down to 20%.
Oh, no.
Wow.
So a customer that rents online, 30%, customer that rents with the call center, 50%. If a manager gets involved in that conversation because they start talking with their own wallet at that point, we see that the number significantly drops. Almost goes to say, hey, yeah, if we just did online rentals and call center rentals, we would increase our revenue significantly.
Wow. That's wild, honestly.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I don't even know. I don't even know what to say to that one.
Yeah.
That hurts my heart. Like
know.
that's a training problem. Whew. Okay.
It is.
Would you say keeping in touch with possible tenants who have done reservations makes the chance that they will follow through and rent from you any higher?
I think the answer is yes, right?
Yeah, definitely. 100%.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Your turn.
Yeah, that's one thing about storage, right? It's nobody's going, hey, you know what? I got 3 hours to kill. Let me go look at storage units, right?
Yeah, it's not like car shopping. Yeah, it's not like car shopping online.
No.
Mhm.
There's one thing about self-storages, and guess what? If it is that one special customer, probably don't want to store with have them store with you anyways. But
No, there's that.
it's a need-based business, so the need would have to be there for them to be looking. And as long as you communicate and you stay in touch with them, so and help them through that journey for renting, they will rent with you.
Yep.
Mhm.
All righty. Last question of the day, y'all. And again, thank you for being so generous with your time. I know both of y'all have a gazillion things to do. Taylor Pierce, is there a near perfect software used to connect your teams together for communication, updates, shout outs that include logging audits, incident reports, people management, etc., i.e., log an ops audit for store 001 with a 97% score, share on feed with team to recognize them, or incident report of break-in, share with team for awareness, or check-in parameters? What a question. So yeah, what tools do you recommend? Raheem, what are y'all using at Mini Mall?
I would say the three things that come to mind right off the bat is, first of all, Teams. Microsoft Teams is a huge one, and then Monday.com is also another great tool that we utilize for some project management and stuff. And so those are the couple things. And with Teams, you can tap into many different platforms and bring them into as apps and different things that you can leverage.
There we go.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm gonna just link to.
Slack, that's what we use.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Slack is another one that sort of, integrates with team. So you can sort of do both at the same time.
Here we go. Yeah, we use Slack here at StoragePug, and we have like probably 15 or 20 different external tools that feed into Slack, so that anytime something needs to happen, the right person or the right team gets notified. And then we also use it for kudos. We have a StoragePug Love channel where we share wins and exciting things that are happening around StoragePug. So,
And we use Google
awesome.
and Monday.
there we go.
So
Those are some good. Yeah, Taylor, great question. If you're still around, yep, you are. Perfect. Yeah. So y'all love this so much. Thanks again for everything, for coming out today and having a great time with our audience. Call Raheem.
Thank you for the invite. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Melissa, thanks again.
yep, absolutely.
All
Fun
right.
as
Thank you
always.
very much.
See you at the end of
Appreciate
June.
it.
It was a pleasure meeting you in person.
Yes. Kind of in person.
Enjoy that
It's all
trip
good.
to India, y'all. When you
Thank you.
Over.
All right. Much
Y'all
love.
have a good day.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
See you
Bye.
later. Bye-bye.
Oh, Brandy said first Gabfocus enjoy. Glad you came out, man. Thank you. All right. See y'all.